Over the past 2 weeks, the United States and China each dropped their own national AI action plans. Bold, detailed, and painting two very different pictures of the future. On one side, you have Washington laying out a playbook to accelerate AI innovation, and on the other side, you have Beijing proposing a framework to govern AI as a global commodity. Today, we're breaking down what's actually in each plan, how they differ at the core, and why this moment could shape not just the AI industry, but the geopolitical map for the next decade. I'm Boardroom Wire, let's jump into it. Now, before we get into the details of each plan, I want to quickly talk about the stages where they were unveiled, because there was a big difference between how the United States rolled out its plan versus how China rolled out theirs. In Washington, the Hill and Valley Forum partnered with the All In podcast to put on what felt like a cross between a political rally and a tech conference. President Donald Trump was center stage, flanked by industry heavyweights and media personalities like Jensen Huang, Chamath Palihapitiya, and the rest of the All In cast. The atmosphere was loud, it was high energy, and built for headlines. Trump essentially delivered a long-winded, winding visionary speech full of nationalistic framing, painting AI dominance as an American imperative. In Shanghai, it was a very different scene at the World Artificial Intelligence Conference, or WAIC. Chinese Premier Li Qiang, who is essentially the second or third highest ranking official in China behind Xi Jinping, was very formal in his address with a much more administrative, methodical, and almost academic tone. Li's remarks focused on championing global collaboration and multilateral governance, sticking close to the official script. So it was the same week, same topic, but completely different theater. America turned it into a show, and China kept it more formal. And that contrast sets the stage for the two very different plans that we're going to talk about next. Let's start with the United States. On July 23rd, the White House unveiled what they're calling America's AI Action Plan, which is a 28-page document with over 90 specific policy actions centered around AI. It's backed by 3 same-day executive orders and together form an aggressive roadmap for how the U.S. plans to lead in AI. The essence of this plan is move fast, build big, and make sure American values, as defined by this administration, are baked into the cake as far as AI goes. And in addition to that, there's really 4 key pillars of this plan that I want to break down. Pillar number 1 is deregulation. The plan directs federal agencies to strip away red tape and fast-track approvals for AI projects, data centers, and infrastructure. It even leans on states to avoid introducing new barriers, arguing for a unified national approach to AI. The goal is simple. If an AI company wants to build, they shouldn't be waiting months or years for permits to build data centers, launch projects, etc. Pillar 2 is energy and infrastructure at wartime speed. AI eats compute and compute eats electricity. The plan explicitly calls for accelerating the build-out of power generation and transmission, favoring dispatchable sources like natural gas and nuclear to meet near-term demand for AI compute. The language here is urgent. Remove bottlenecks and expand capacity right now. Pillar 3, bias-free AI. One of the more politically charged pieces of the plan, an executive order banning what the administration calls woke AI in federal agencies. In practice, it sets procurement criteria that requires models to be truth-seeking and ideologically neutral. Now, obviously, that's a pretty subjective standard, but it means vendors will be evaluated not just on accuracy or performance, but on the worldview that their models reflect. Pillar 4, export the American AI stack. Another executive order creates an American AI exports program. Basically a package deal for allies that includes chips, cloud services, and US-trained models. It's about spreading American standards overseas and making it harder for other nations, especially China, to set their own competing frameworks. The tone for the whole plan is competitive and unapologetic. This isn't about building guardrails first and innovation second. Now it's about building as fast as possible and handling governance as you go. which has been a far cry from really what we've seen the last 8 years or so from political administrations that are looking to govern things like energy, AI, what have you. This throws it all out the door. Basically, what the US is saying is AI is critical path for us to remain a hegemony and superpower over the next decade or century. So we're going to do whatever it takes to win in AI. This is an arms race, and the United States wants to win it. Now let's look at China's approach, announced just 3 days later on July 26th at the World Artificial Intelligence Conference in Shanghai. Premier Li Qiang took the stage to unveil what's officially called the Global AI Governance Action Plan. It's a 13-point framework that reads less like a rallying cry and more like a policy white paper. The tone was calm, administrative, and deeply rooted in the language of multilateralism. The headline proposal was the creation of a global AI cooperation organization, a new body that would oversee AI governance internationally, likely under some form of United Nations alignment. Alongside that, they also proposed 2 separate UN-linked dialogue mechanisms to coordinate on AI safety, standards, and ethics. If the US plan is built around national advantage, China's is built around the idea of shared AI commons. Let's break down their 13-point framework into 4 main themes. Theme 1 is governance and safety. Essentially, they support a development of a global safety framework, coordinating cross-border risk testing and setting up shared reporting systems for incidents and misuse of AI globally. Theme 2 is open and standardized AI, essentially promoting open source model development, cross-border developer communities, and shared technical benchmarks. The point being that this isn't just about technology, it's a way to invite collaboration from countries that can't afford their own proprietary AI systems. Theme 3 is equitable access. So building out AI capacity in the global south, providing easier access to computing power for developing nations so that they can tap into the so-called AI dividends, whether that accrue in healthcare, agriculture, education, or otherwise. Essentially, again, making sure that AI is developed inclusively. Theme 4 is data and trade facilitation. So encouraging compliant, transparent cross-border data use, and even creating an orderly market for training data sets so they're not just locked up in a few different countries. So overall, China's position is more of a soft power play. By positioning itself as the champion of open access and global fairness in AI, China is trying to court countries that may be skeptical of US dominance but still want to reap the benefits of AI. In other words, their approach is just as much about diplomacy as it is about technology, building alliances through governance rather than through speed of execution like in the US model. So now that we've heard each country's pitch, let's put them side by side. The United States plan is built around winning the race. Move faster, build bigger, and secure competitive advantage before anyone else can catch up. It's action-oriented, rooted in deregulation, infrastructure acceleration, and shaping standards through exports and procurement. Think of it as deploy first, govern later. China's plan is about governing the system, not just for itself, but for everyone. It's focused on creating the rules of the road, making sure those rules are written in a multilateral forum, and pulling as many countries as possible into that process. The emphasis is on inclusion, open source cooperation, and capacity building for the global south. If the US is trying to lead by building the fastest car, China is trying to lead by writing the traffic laws. Now here's where it gets interesting. Both strategies have overlap. Both acknowledge that AI equals power. Both are trying to shape standards just through different levers. The US uses exports, alliances, and procurement rules to spread its influence, while China uses governance bodies, open source frameworks, and aid to developing countries to expand its reach. Now, if you read between the lines on both of these respective plans, I think that there's a really interesting insight and underlying truth that's being implied both by the United States and China in very different ways. And that is, the United States is clearly ahead in AI. So when you look at each of the respective plans, the US clearly isn't playing catch up. It's acknowledged that it's in the lead, and it's using the American AI Action Plan as a blueprint for widening the gap. Aggressive deregulation, rapid infrastructure build-out, exporting the US AI stack, all of these things are moves of a country that knows it has the advantage and wants to press it before anyone else can close in. China's strategy, on the other hand, tells a different story. The focus on multilateral governance, open source collaboration, and equitable access sounds cooperative, but in practice, it also reads as a way to slow down the pace of the frontrunner. By pushing for international rules and shared control, China creates friction that could temper the US's speed of execution in AI. And here's the irony. This global governance push is coming from a country in China that historically has been fiercely protectionist of its own market, and let's be honest, not exactly a champion of strict IP protections and law. Yet now China is positioning itself as the voice of inclusivity and rule setting in AI. The result is ultimately a strict contrast. The US wants to sprint ahead and extend its lead, and China wants to level the playing field and perhaps slow the race by bringing more players into the game and making sure the rules aren't written unilaterally in Washington. So in closing, the two biggest superpowers on the planet are painting very different pictures for the future of AI. The US plan says, we're ahead, let's move faster, build bigger, and lock in that lead, while China's plan says, let's slow things down, open the gates, and make sure everyone has a say in the rules. Both approaches are strategic, both are about influence, but one is about acceleration and the other is about moderation. And the fact that China is pushing global governance while the US pushes unilateral speed is telling about where each sees themselves on the scoreboard when it comes to the AI race. So with that, I'm going to wrap things up here. If you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate a subscribe, a like, a comment. What do you think about the US versus China in the AI race? And for more strategic breakdowns on business and technology, be sure to check back in with the channel. This is Boardroom Wire. See you on the next one.